Veteran Sky commentator and former lightweight world champion Jim Watt announced his retirement from his job at Sky Sports a few days ago. Now, Jim Watt was, I guess still is, a very divisive figure among British boxing fans. It seems, particularly over the past 5, 6, 7 years, that most British boxing fans don't like Jim Watt as a commentator. I've heard various different complaints as to why people don't like him. Some people say that he's too biased in favor of British fighters. Then I've heard other people say that he is too biased against British fighters and in favor of the foreign fighter. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't sometimes. I remember when he commentated on David Haye against Nikolai Valuev. And during that fight, he was scoring the fight. And he made it very clear that he was scoring the fight based on how he thought the German judges would be scoring it, because he didn't want the British fans watching to get their hopes up. Because Nikolai Valuev was based in Germany and fighting as defensively as David Haye was, throwing as few punches as he did, with Valuev coming forward and pressing the action. Jim Watt was thinking, you know what, I can't see the judges scoring these rounds for David Haye when he's being so defensive and he's only landing maybe a handful of punches a round. And he made this clear when he was doing the commentary, that that's why he was scoring the rounds the way he was scoring them, because he didn't expect the judges to be completely objective. Now, he caught a hell of a lot of hate for that, because so many British boxing fans and David Haye fans were so caught up in the moment and everything like that, and so elated by Haye's victory, that they were furious at Jim Watt. And that's the first time that I noticed any real hate towards him. And there have been other fights as well where he's done similar things. I think it might have been when Macklin fought Sturm in Germany. There are a few others. And then after that, it seems like he was doing the opposite. Perhaps he'd heard about the criticism and he felt like, you know what, people are criticizing me for being unpatriotic. Maybe I have to try and address the balance a little bit. I don't know. I always prefer when commentators are not patriotic. But within British sport, there tends to be this feeling that the commentators are supposed to be supporting the British fighter. I don't like that. I like it when the commentators are not supporting anybody. They're just remaining objective. So, I don't know. People have their critiques of Jim Watt. Personally, I liked Jim Watt. I'm not saying he was a perfect commentator, and perhaps the fact that I like him also comes down to a little bit of nostalgia, because I've been watching Jim Watt for several decades, or listening to his commentaries for several decades, since the 80s when he was commentating on ITV with Reg Gutteridge, who's now passed away. He passed away a few years ago. So I was a fan of Jim Watt's commentary since then. And a lot of the classic moments in boxing that I've witnessed over the years had Jim Watt commentating. You know? So many big fights. Bo Holyfield, the rematch, the second fight that was on ITV. I mean, just countless fights over the years. McClellan against Ben, just numerous fights. Then obviously he switched over to Sky Sports and continued his career. So I've always liked Jim Watt. I'm not saying he's perfect, but I've always been one of his supporters. I like the whole Jim Watt bingo thing as well, and Jim Watt's catchphrases and all that type of stuff. I've always found him good and entertaining. So I'm one of his few fans. If you don't like Jim Watt, fair enough. Maybe you could explain why in the comment section below. I'll be interested to read. Jim Watt is, I think he's in his late 60s now, 67, 68, something like that. So perhaps he just retired because of old age. He wants to put his feet up and enjoy his retirement. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that his daughter, I believe, died last year. And it's very, very difficult for anybody to lose a child. Very difficult. Maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe he's not feeling the same as he was before. Maybe there's some health issues. Or maybe, like I say, it's just because he's not a spring chicken. He's in his late 60s. It just feels like it's time to relax. He don't like having the pressure on him to go to work and do all that type of stuff. Maybe it's a combination of all types of different factors. But now the question is going to be, who's going to replace Jim Watt? I've been very critical of British boxing commentary and presenters over the past, pretty much since the beginning of broadcast boxing in the United Kingdom. I think that the standard of commentators and presenters in British broadcasting with regards to boxing is far lower than it is in the United States. In the United States, you look at Showtime and HBO, or even ESPN, it doesn't really seem to be about who you know in terms of getting a gig as a commentator. It generally comes down to how much talent you have for commentating. Whereas within Britain, and you look at Box Nation, Sky, etc., it seems to me to come down to the friends that you have within the industry, not how good you are at the actual job. No disrespect to this guy I'm going to talk about right now, but Ed Robinson, again, no disrespect to him. Maybe he's a very, very nice guy, but in terms of his on-screen ability as a presenter and as an interviewer, are you trying to tell me that Ed Robinson's good? He's not good, people. There is no way that a guy like an Ed Robinson could get a job doing what he does on HBO or Showtime. He simply don't have the verbal ability. He don't have the charisma. He don't have the on-screen presence to be able to get a job on HBO or Showtime, because the standards there for the talent you actually have to be on screen and interviewing fighters and commentating is far higher in America, it seems. Now, obviously, there are exceptions in America. They have had some poor commentators on HBO and Showtime from time to time. Generally, they tend to be boxers, because boxers, because of the fact that they are experienced and what have you, and they have inside knowledge and whatnot, they tend to get jobs as commentators based on the strength of that, more so than their actual talent for the job. Lennox Lewis would be a good example. He was a terrible commentator. Let's be real. Great fighter, terrible commentator. I'm glad that HBO did not renew his contract because Lewis was terrible. Sugar Ray Leonard, I always felt, was a poor commentator. They got him back briefly for PBC, but for whatever reason, PBC have moved on and they don't seem to be using Sugar Ray Leonard anymore. Poor commentator. Then again, you get some fighters who are very good commentators. In fact, quite a few fighters who are good commentators and good pundits. I think Carl Froch is a good pundit. I think David Haye, for all the criticisms I have of him, is a good pundit. I think in the United States, PAULIE MALIGNAGGI is a terrific commentator. Roy Jones Jr. is a good commentator, in my opinion. Manny Stewart was great, R.I.P. Manny. I think Antonio Tarver is also a good commentator. I think BJ Flores is pretty good. So there are plenty of boxers out there who not only have the job as commentators and presenters and what have you based on their resume as fighters, but also because they do actually have some type of talent for the job. But as I say, in the case of people who are not necessarily professional boxers or whatever, and they're just presenters, in the United Kingdom, there don't seem to be a very high standard. Steve Bunce, who I know is on the radio and all that type of stuff. Some people like Bunce, he don't get it twisted, but I've always found him awful to watch with his squeaky voice and his jittery manner. If it was me controlling Box Nation, I certainly wouldn't have employed him. Not in front of the camera anyway, maybe behind the scenes. it is what it is. Speaking of Box Nation, I do like Jim Rosenthal. I've always liked him as a presenter. Barry Jones is good. I like Barry Jones as a commentator. Not a fan of John Rowland. Not a fan of Nick Horlin on Sky either. So anyway, before I go off in a totally different direction, let me get back to my original point. Who's going to replace Jim Watt as a commentator on Sky Sports? The candidate some people are talking about, Paulie Malignaggi, because he's worked on Sky Sports before, but would Sky Sports really be willing to pay the type of money that Paulie Malignaggi would probably demand for relocating himself to the United Kingdom permanently? Because he would have to relocate, I would think. I mean, can he really be flying over every week to the UK to do commentary? Bit difficult. So I would imagine that for him to take Jim Watt's job, he'd have to relocate to the UK, and he'd probably want a fair amount of money for that. I'm not sure whether Sky would be willing to do that when they do have options at home. One of the other options, if Paulie Malignaggi don't get a job, and again, he would be an excellent choice because he is a fantastic commentator. One of the other options is Spencer Fearon. Personally, I like Spencer Fearon as a replacement for Jim Watt. Not everybody likes Spencer Fearon. You know, the guy, some people say he's like Marmite, but whatever the case may be, personally, I like him. He's got a lot of knowledge about boxing, and I think he brings a different vibe to the commentary team. You know, he's a South London guy, a former professional himself. He's very knowledgeable. He's a very strong character. You know, he's not an Ed Robertson type. He's a stronger character than that. You know, so personally, yeah, I like the idea of Spencer Fearon replacing Jim Watt. I personally do like it. I would like to hear his commentaries, and I think he would be the strongest commentator, to be honest with you. I think he's a stronger commentator than Nick Horlin, or would be a stronger commentator than Nick Horlin. I like Glenn McCrory. I think he's good. You know, I liked him when he was working with Ian Darke. In fact, Ian Darke, that's the guy. If I had a number one choice for who would replace Glenn McCrory, it would be Ian Darke. That would be my number one choice because, of course, Glenn McCrory used to be the primary commentator on Sky Sports for boxing. But now he does bits and pieces for Sky Sports, but apparently his main job is elsewhere. I believe it's on ESPN or might be BT or somewhere else. But his primary job is not doing, commentary for Sky Sports Boxing, which for me is unfortunate. If they could get him back, I think that would be ideal. But if they can't get him back and they can't get Paulie Malignaggi, I think Spencer Fearon is an excellent choice. Aside from that, I can't think of anyone. I don't think Ed Robinson should do it. Again, no disrespect to Ed Robinson. Might be a really nice guy, but I'm just talking about in terms of talent people. You know, another guy who I always felt was a huge loss for Sky Sports was Paul Dempsey. I think Paul Dempsey was an excellent presenter. A pretty good commentator as well, but as a presenter, doing basically the job that Ed Robinson does now, because he does a lot of the presenting. Paul Dempsey was terrific. You know, he was articulate. He had a way with words. He had a screen presence. Paul Dempsey, excellent. And just look at the post-fight interview that he did with David Haye after the Demori fight. It seems like people enjoyed Paul Dempsey's post-fight interview with David Haye more than they enjoyed the actual fight itself. Because Paul Dempsey was asking David Haye pertinent questions. So, yeah, if anyhow they can get Paul Dempsey back in, you know, maybe have him as a commentator, I'd like that to be another option. You know, but I don't know what goes on behind the scenes and what type of circumstances Paul Dempsey left Sky Sports in. I don't know, maybe it wasn't too friendly. Let me know how you feel in the comment section below. Do you like Jim Watt? Did you not like him? Are you happy to see him retire? Are you sad to see him retire? Let me know. And who do you think would be the best choice to replace him? And who do you think will be the most realistic choice to replace him? Drop all those things in the comment section below. It's your boy Hatman. I'm out.